If you have your Bible, you could just turn to Joshua chapter 5. Joshua chapter 5. 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I wrote a book called The Third Option. I am going to be speaking from this book. You can get it on Amazon. I'm not going to do a big commercial, but this book has everything I'm going to say today pretty much in it, and then a bunch more. When I was 8 years old, Martin Luther King was killed. And I remember I remember what I felt, I remember what I thought. What I felt was, how could they do that? Similar to what we're feeling now. It was so wrong. But I also remember what I thought. I thought, what do we do now? When I wrote that book, wrote that book for the purpose of giving us solutions and answers of what we can do now. Here we are, 2 years after I wrote the book, and we're in a worse situation than we were 2 years ago. So today I want to talk about how we got divided at a very basic level, but more so ideas on how we can come together. My prayer is that you would receive for you, as I said in the beginning, that you would let the Holy Spirit speak to you about your life. I know you can watch TV and hear the news and always want to point fingers at that person, but my prayer is that the Holy Spirit would speak to you, specifically about your life. A little background, I grew up in New York. I have a white grandmother, had a white grandmother, she's passed. She married a black man from Jamaica. When she was in Jamaica, her parents sent her from Jamaica, West Indies, to Jamaica, Queens, so she wouldn't marry a black Jamaican. If you've ever been to Jamaican Queens, there's a whole bunch of black Jamaicans. She meets this black guy, my grandfather. They start dating. My grandfather couldn't go in the front door of our house. He had to go around the back door. They ended up getting married. When they got married, her family disowned her. I never knew her family. To this day, I don't know anybody from her family. They lived 15, 20 minutes away. We never heard of them, spoke about them until I was an adult. We just figured they're, all of us brown people, and then there was Grandma Dorothy. We didn't know where the white lady came from, but she was our grandma, and that was it. It was just the way it was. But that was my one grandmother's side. I have another grandmother who was half Chinese and half black. Mr. Wong Kim Fong is his name, but they called him Charlie. I don't know where they got Charlie from, but Wong Kim Fong came to Jamaica, West Indies, and started messing around with the women there and had my grandmother. My grandmother married a man there, my grandpa, who was the only grandpa I knew. He was also black. I grew up in a black neighborhood, was raised by United Nations. I went to school in a white neighborhood for 8 years. When I grew up, it was just after Jim Crow laws ended, which for all you who might not know, Jim Crow was when it's equal but separate. Whites went to one bathroom, blacks went to another. Whites drank out of one water fountain, blacks drank out of another. Blacks sat in the back of the bus, whites sat in the front of the bus. Blacks got on the bus in the back door, whites got on the bus at the front door. Jim Crow laws was all separated. Rosa Parks broke that, sat in the front of the bus and said, I'm not getting up. That's what started the civil rights movement. I was born right after that ended, so where I grew up was all black, pretty much, and when I went to school it was 100% white. And every day I crossed over this street called Ocean Avenue and went into that white neighborhood. I had anxiety. For 8 years, from first grade to 8th grade. That was my world, separate. But yet we played on football team. We had people that got along. And I started wondering, even as a young age, how can we get along? How can we do this? And I want to propose to you that the devil has done a great job of dividing our country, us versus them. Wherever you're at, I want you to say out loud, us, say us, and say them. The devil has done a great job of dividing our country, us versus them. The third option, which is what this is about right here, the third option is that we honor what we have in common. In other words, you can think about us versus them, where it's those people and my people. But the third option is that we say, no, that we have more in common than our differences. We have more things in common than our differences. So I want to talk about how we can focus and bring unity by focusing on what we have in common versus focusing on what we have different. Now, I'm going to put up 3 pictures here today because I want to give you some history of what's going on. And the only reason I do this is because I had someone the other day say they still don't understand what's going on, which I don't know how that could be possible. Ahmaud Arbery in February was jogging down the street and two white men, a father and a son, were in the car, pickup truck, and another white man in the car with a camera. They hunted him down and shot him. For 72 days, they did nothing with that video. The police had it, but they did nothing with that video. And the only reason because of protesters, the police put it out, and 3 men were arrested eventually. Breonna Taylor was in the bed. They came in her house. Police came in her house and shot her. They had the wrong address and shot her. She was an EMT. And we all know George Floyd. When George Floyd was killed, I processed what I was feeling. Yes, we were all feeling angry, but what I was feeling was a sense of powerlessness. And then it hit me for the first time in 60 years that all my life I have felt this sense of powerlessness to a white culture. Now, let me say this. This is not about black versus white. This is about sin. Racism is all over the world. And if you go to other countries, it's black on black. You go to other countries, it's Korean, North Korean, South Korean. It's all kind of cultures. But my experience was that I felt this sense of powerlessness when I saw him kneeling on his neck, that it was a statement that we are powerless, powerful over you. There was a dehumanizing of George and a whole culture of people, which is why there's so much outrage. I am so hurt at how the devil has put us against each other. And my prayer is that as I talk about the third option, that God would give you a vision on what you can do to make a difference. Joshua chapter 5. In Joshua chapter 5, we're going to see Joshua spell out the third option and help us understand how we can walk in it. It says in Joshua chapter 5, verse 13, it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And he said, are you for us or our adversaries? This is so important. When you think of an us versus them culture, us is all the people who are like me. We're going to get to that in a minute. And the them is all the people who are not like me. Us is all the people who don't look like me or who don't identify with me or who don't have what I have. All the people I think are not on my side. And then them is everybody else. And in our culture, it's either black against white. That's the devil, division. In our culture, it's either for or against the police, against the devil. Again, it's the devil. Everybody on the police are bad or everybody on the police is good. In our culture, it's American versus immigrant. We got all this division, and that is a spiritual battle. And even though people can hurt you and people that can oppress you, it doesn't mean that all of them are one thing or all of you are another thing. So here's Joshua. He's getting ready to lead the Israelites into the promised land, exactly the land that God promised them. And this commander, this angel, actually it's Jesus, is standing there with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua comes up to him and says, are you for us or them? In other words, or adversaries. Look at this. Adversaries. In other words, if you're not on my side, you are my adversary. This is exactly what we're seeing in culture right now. If you're not on my side, in my mind, and part of my group, you're my enemy. And this is where we got to get away from. Because when we start labeling all those people as one thing, we consider them their enemies, we start drawing lines in the sand. And so he says to the commander, are you for us, all us Israelites, or our adversaries? And the commander of the Lord, look what it says, the commander of the Lord's army says, no. Now, think about it. That's not an answer. In other words, do you want ice cream or cake? And you say no. Well, it's got to be one or the other. Those are the two options you have. And the commander of the Lord's army says no. There's a third option. What we're seeing today is we're seeing a lot of people who are angry, and I get it. There are a lot of people protesting, you're angry. A lot of people who are not protesting who are angry. A lot of people who are not protesting who are brokenhearted. A lot of people protesting who are not protesting that are crushed, scared, tired of the system. The system is broken. It's unfair. What happened to George, Ahmaud, Breonna, and on and on and on is wrong, unfair. The system has to change. But we get this us versus them mentality where all of them are bad. All of them are not bad. So the commander of the Lord's army says there's a third option. Look what he says. Says, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshiped and said, now, what does my Lord say to his servant? If you go to, I'm in the United States. If you go to Britain, if I go to UK and I went to the embassy in the UK, I'm walking down the street in the UK, I'm in the UK, I'm in London. But as soon as I step on the property of the U.S. Embassy, I am now in the United States of America, and the laws of the United States of America apply to me when I'm on that dirt. But as soon as I step out of the embassy, I'm now back in the UK, and the laws of London apply to me. What he said to Joshua, he said, Joshua, I am the commander of the Lord's army. I am Jesus, I'm God. This whole promised land thing is my idea, not your idea. And so when you say, am I on your side or their side, I'm on neither one of your sides. I'm on my side. And this is what I was telling you in the very beginning, that I want to be on God's side. And God is about justice. But God is about justice God's way. We definitely need justice in this case, in all these cases, no question. But we have to do it God's way. And so with Joshua, with the commander of the Lord's army, says, Joshua, this is all about me. This is not about you. This is not about doing it your way. This is about doing it my way. And trust me, God wants justice more than any of us. God brings about a better form of justice more than anybody. God brings about a better form of righteousness, fairness, equality than more than anybody. That's why we have to do it his way. So when he told Joshua, you are now on holy ground. You have to do it my way. You have to do it my way. I'm here to tell you, church, we have to do it God's way. Politics ain't going to fix it, even though the laws need to be changed. Only God can change people's hearts. And it has to start with you. You have to ask yourself, how far are you willing to go to be like Jesus? Can you pray for the protesters right now? Can you say, Lord, I love them and I want them to be close to you? I don't love what they do, but I love them. Can you say the words Black Lives Matter? Not the organization, just the fact that George matters and everybody who looks like George matters just as much as you. Can you say white lives matter? Of course, that's the theme of the day. I mean, that's what culture says. We get that. Can you say that black lives matter? For real. The same as white lives. Can you say justice for everyone is the right thing and the only thing to do? And so as we're on the embassy ground, as we're on holy ground, we say, Lord, we want to do this your way. Let me give you a little sociology. Sociologists refer to how we divide ourselves by groups. It says in-group, out-group, the way we sort people that are either like us or not like us. In other words, all guys are a group. That's one group. All ladies are a group. Whites are a group. Blacks are a group. Rich are a group. Republicans are a group. And Democrats are a group. We go on. And you may say all protesters are a group to a degree. Once we identify our group, we give in-group bias. In-group bias is our tendency to give preferential treatment to people who are like me. And when you have people in your group, you walk into a room. If I walk into a room and there's football players over there and baseball players over there, I'm going to be more inclined to go to football players and give preferential treatment to those people. And that's what we see in our country. We go to people who we are like, and we give favoritism to people who we are like, and we give preferential treatment to people who we are like. That's just how racism works. It's our sin nature. It's all about me, because people who are like me are better than people who are not like me. And when we get asked to bless and be encouragement to someone else, we feel like we're violating something. Now, I want to give you 9 characteristics of in-group bias, because this is what racism feels like, looks like, and what it does. In-group bias, 9 things. I am more comfortable with those who are like me. I am more inclined to spend time socially with those who are like me. I am more patient with those who are like me. I give the benefit of the doubt quicker to those who are like me. I express more grace when mistakes are made by those who are like me. It is easier to communicate with those who are like me. I assume that I will get along easier with those who are like me. That means when you walk into a room or you walk on the street and you see someone who like me, you assume I'm going to get along with them, so you treat them better. I am more willing to go out of my way to help those who are like me. I possess more positive assumptions than those who are like me. So therefore, when someone's like me, I got all these positive things I'm thinking, all these assumptions I'm making about those people. That's in-group bias. That's what we see every single day that people express to people who are like them. The opposite is true, that when you see people who are not like you, you do the opposite. You do the opposite. Now, here's the thing. When you identify the people who are like you and you form that group, you have this pressure that you have to act according to the rules of the group. And if you act inconsistent with the rules of the group, you're a sellout. So if you don't toe the party line, as they say, and say what all the people in your group say, do what all the people in your group say, then they take your group card. They take your black card, your white card, whatever card you got, they take it. What we're seeing now in the country is all these groups are being challenged. One of the things that hit me, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, was when I saw George killed. For the first time in my life, I realized that the racism I had experienced had put a cloud of powerlessness over my life. I felt powerless to the white culture. I felt like white people can do whatever they want to me. That was my experience. It's from what I experienced. It's from what I saw. Doesn't mean all white people are bad. This was my experience. And when I saw that, it triggered. And I want to say something to all my white brothers and sisters. You have power. The white culture has more power than black culture, which is why those things can happen. And racism will be eliminated when we work together, but we need your voice. We need your voice. We can't just have people of color screaming that this is wrong and speaking out. And I want to speak to my church. I need your voice. Because there are people in your family right now who are hurting. Don't get me wrong. I know you're hurting, but we've been hurting. And I want to encourage you to make your voice known. Make a video with your face and your voice saying you denounce this violence, saying that you want equal justice for everyone. Say that you believe that a black life is just as valuable as a white life. Say it. Because I can tell you for years we have heard nothing from a lot of people. Trust me, I know a lot of white people do great things, don't get me wrong. But as I said in the very beginning, you have to deal with whatever God speaks to you as an individual. And we want to help you, give you a voice. We do want to help you give you a voice, but we need your voice because the group that we're all in says, here are the things you should and should not say. God says, I want you in my group. I want you standing up for righteousness, even if it risks some criticism. So this is your in-group. Now here's your out-group. I am less comfortable with those who are not like me. I am less inclined to spend time socially with those who are not like me. I'm going to avoid you. I am less patient with those who are not like me. I give the benefit of the doubt less to those who are not like me. You give the benefit of the doubt. I express less grace when mistakes are made by those who are not like me. It is more difficult to communicate with those who are not like me. I don't assume, listen, this is an assumption. I don't assume I will get along with those who are not like me. Think about this mentality. If my group looks like this and I assume I'm not going to get along with you and I'm going to avoid you, guess what happens? There's a division. That's the us versus them. And it comes from ignorance, it comes from sin, it comes from arrogance, it comes from lack of information, lack of relationship, whatever it is. But this is what happens. I don't assume I will get along. I am less willing to go out of my way to help those who are not like me. I possess less positive assumptions about those who are not like me. In other words, when I see you because you're not in my group, I don't understand you, I assume something different than when I am with people who are like me. I assume. So before we get into solutions, I just want you to understand whatever your world is, because we all have world, we all have a circle of friends, we all have a self-identification, how we identify, what we believe about people, that you would step out of that mentality and say, Lord, I want to stand on holy ground, and I want you to speak to me about how I can love beyond my group, how I can put myself out there to understand what people in another group is. That when I see people protesting that, Lord, yes, I may not agree with, I don't agree with, and you as well, don't agree with the looting and all kinds of stuff, but what's going on? Those are people made in your image too. Help me understand, instead of saying those people and me. So I'm going to give you 5 things you can do. Number 1, acknowledge that you have blind spots. Acknowledge that you have a blind spot. A blind spot is not knowing what you don't know. I grew up left-handed. By the way, if you're in your house right now, just raise your hand if you're left-handed. Raise your hand, okay? God, I can't see you, but God bless you. If you're right-handed, raise your hand. Whenever I do this in public, 90% of the room is right-handed. And I tell them that the world was made by right-handed people for right-handed people. For example, if you're right-handed, if you're in school, your desk was right here on your right hand. You can write, put your elbow and write. You don't even have to look at your paper, and you can turn over here and talk to the girl next to you while you're writing because your elbow is braced. I'm left-handed, so I'm out here in space. So hold up, girl, and I can't talk to her because I'm drawing my name. But you had the advantage because you were right-handed because the desk was made for you. If you're right-handed, you can go to any golf shop and get any golf club you want, driver, anyone you want, because the world was made for you. If you're right-handed, you can get a catcher's mitt, drive to the store, get a catcher's mitt, come back, be playing catch with your son, your daughter, while me, I'm left-handed, driving all around town, can't find a catcher's mitt. And you say, why can't you find a catcher's mitt? What's wrong? I got mine, and you think I'm making it up. The blind spot, that's called right privilege. It's called having an advantage and more advantages than you even know. Right privilege. The person who's saying, I can't get a job, he's not lying. He's not making it up. The person who says, I didn't do that crime, he's not lying. I didn't make it up. There was an incident just the other day where a lady in Manhattan called up and said some African-American man was coming after her. She had a dog off the leash. If you didn't see the video, he asked her to take the dog off the leash or put the dog on the leash. It was an area where you're supposed to have your dog on the leash, and she just called up. Police said, African-American man is harassing me. He's blah, 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 blah. Please send the police. All she had to do was say he was black. And that was it. That was enough. And he was, please come. Oh, black man. Come to find out, that guy, Harvard degree, very educated, very professional, very compassionate guy, actually called people to leave her alone because she got death threats after this. She lost her job. I was talking to somebody, and this person said, if I didn't see that video, I would have believed her, just like that. It's a blind spot. You don't realize how much we have just bought into a mentality. And there's certain people who have experiences that we've been saying, this is wrong, and it's just been ignored. Acknowledge that you have a blind spot. A social narrative is a story that shapes how you see the world. And all of us have grown up hearing certain information, seeing certain stories. And as we've grown up, we've come to shape how we see the world. And all the stories that we've learned from our family, from our friends, from our neighborhood, from our school, have formed a prescription through which we interpret the news, interpret what we hear, and it's created blind spots. And if you're on this side of the tracks and you hear these stories, when you hear someone complain, this is what you believe. And if you're on this side of the tracks and you hear a story and you hear the story and you interpret it from your perspective, you come to this conclusion. That means you have a blind spot. Acknowledge that you don't know the whole story. As a matter of fact, anybody in your out group, you by definition do not know. So whenever you hear something about somebody else, acknowledge that maybe I don't know the whole story. And instead of judging the person, instead of judging the situation, say, Lord, I need to understand better because I probably don't know the whole story. Acknowledge that you have a blind spot. Become a learner. Before you decide what you're going to do about all this, decide what you're going to be. And what you're going to be is a humble learner. It's easy to watch TV and make judgments, but be a humble learner. Learn really what this pain is all about. Number two, rename those people as your brother, sister, or your neighbor. The greatest commandment in the Bible is Matthew 22. This is awesome. Rename it. Look what it says. Matthew 22:37. It says, "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" What's the greatest commandment? Jesus said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, all your soul, and with all your mind." This is the first, and great commandment. As a believer, by the way, if you don't believe in God, none of this, as a believer, this is our number one commandment. This is the commandment that's going to change the world. That you love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, which basically means you do what he says. And so all of us, as I said in the very beginning of this message, the number one thing we do is obey God. Do what he says. From the heart. Number one. And if you don't do that,